It's lovely. It's amazing.
Here's a fun question. Why didn't medieval Europeans smoke weed? The short answer is that they could have. Marijuana is attested in Byzantine medical literature, though not in earlier Greek and Roman medicine. And crusaders apparently encountered it in the Middle East. Remember the Hashashins, the fabled pot-smoking assassins? Somehow that tidbit didn't make it into the awful Assassin's Creed series. And you can definitely grow it anywhere in Europe. So there was nothing stopping someone from bringing marijuana seeds from Asia and planting them in England or wherever. But they didn't, or at least not often enough to develop a culture of pot smoking. Why not? Let's crack this open a bit more and go for a trip.
My name is That Habsburg Map Guy. I am a historian. I'm also an amateur ecologist of sorts. I live in the Republic of Georgia at the moment, and I am particularly fascinated by the ethno-history of drugs.
Whoa, ganja, ganja.
This is a video that in all likelihood will be demonetized because I'm talking about a topic that's banned on YouTube, specifically wild marijuana. But I am doing this video anyways because I think it's fascinating and I think that it's a topic that many people are curious about, and I'm able to provide some knowledge. By the way, if you want to support content that our techno-feudal overlords find objectionable, you can donate a few dollars directly to me here. So I'm sitting in a village in Caucasus in the Republic of Georgia, and this is a wild marijuana plant. Now you can see this is actually the male plant. Go away, Gogo. This is my street dog named Gogo. So marijuana grows wild across Georgia, and I often come across it in wandering in the countryside, sometimes along railroad tracks, sometimes on the edges of fields. Actually, the technical term is feral cannabis. Usually it's a wild strain of hemp, which is the high CBD, low THC variety. It's not usually marijuana that you might be familiar with smoking. And this is part of what makes cannabis so special. It's Janus-faced plasticity. This is a critical detail for the story, and we'll get back to it later. So marijuana has a long, long history. It was probably one of the first crops cultivated, domesticated by humans, probably in Western China in prehistory. I'm talking like 10, 11, maybe 12,000 years ago. It's an ancient crop. Ooh. Come on, Juba. Oh, this poor starving dog. I'll feed this dog for a moment. Georgia is unfortunately full of starving street dogs. This one is barely eating. You can see how her ribs are popping out. I don't know why she's sitting in this ditch. So I wonder if she's stuck. I might try lifting her up. I always bring around a bag of dog food for situations like this. Hopefully this will get her off on her feet again. Yeah, but there's not much more you can do out here. These dogs won't get adopted. If they're lucky, they'll get their shots by the municipality. Our sort of semi-adopted street dog is one of the lucky few who somewhat inherently has sociability and very little fear of people. And she was able to ingratiate herself with us. Anyway, I was talking about marijuana, the prehistory.
I'm being a bit lazy with my terminology here. Marijuana and weed aren't technical terms, and actually they're directly incorrect because this prehistoric cannabis probably wasn't the smokable kind. Its proper name would be something closer to hemp, grown for its fiber and seed, and which probably contributed to a revolution in human technology about 10,000 years ago. The American anthropologist Elizabeth Wayland Barber wrote a fascinating book about this, by the way. Basically, prehistoric Eurasians cultivated a theorized proto-cannabis plant for its oil seeds as food, and then for the long fibers in its stems to make cloth and rope. And this string technology made basically everything we take for granted as part of civilization possible, accelerating productivity and human well-being.
So this is the genesis of cannabis as a fiber and seed plant.
By 5500 BC, hemp-type cannabis was found widespread across what became China and Japan. And this is also about when it started to spread west across Eurasia. The Proto-Indo-European root word for it was kan, or ken, which later morphed into hanf and hemp in German and English. And it also seems to have been brought into Europe, at least by 2000 BC, if not earlier, by the Yamnaya.
Then something very interesting happened. So maybe 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, somewhere in the Himalayan highlands, very high altitude, cannabis began to change. And instead of producing CBD, or the precursor of CBD, which you might know for the anti-anxiety drug today, it started producing a different kind of drug, which was a precursor of THC.
This is hella late, by the way. The first recorded evidence of cannabis being used as a drug comes from the Atharva Veda, which is the last and least Aryan of the Vedas, estimated to date to between 1200 and 900 BCE. That's at least 1,000 years after hemp was spread across Eurasia. And on that note, you sometimes hear claims online that the Yamnaya were pot smokers, but that's almost certainly false. Their descendants, the Scythians, only began to burn drug-type cannabis during funerals some 2,000 years later.
This evolution is what makes cannabis so fascinating, this plasticity, because every cannabis plant is of the same species, but they can either be genetically productive of a CBD dominance, focusing more on producing fiber, growing taller, or it can be genetically THC dominant, producing more of the drug, which is probably some sort of ancient pesticide of some sort.
To be completely clear, there seems to be a sort of inverse relationship between cannabis's potential for fiber making and its production of drug THC precursor chemicals. It's possible that the theoretical wild proto-cannabis could have produced a very mild high when smoked, but this is purely speculative, and it would have disappeared by the late Neolithic as the plant was transformed through domestication. The cannabis seeds brought to Europe by the steppe peoples were a hemp varietal.
So when we look at this on a global scale, cannabis in Western Eurasia and cannabis in Eastern Eurasia look very different. And cannabis in specifically the Himalayas and the subcontinent, India, are uniquely, predominantly marijuana. But every plant has some variant, some combination of these two possible phenotypes.
The mechanism for this is pretty interesting. So cannabis plants naturally produce certain quantities of cannabigerolic acid, CBGA, which is then converted by enzymes into either cannabidiolic acid, CBDA, or tetrahydrocannabinolic acid, THCA.
Say what?
However, when hemp-type and drug-type cannabis plants hybridize, they produce a sort of an intermediate chemotype with a balance between THC and CBD. This is really important because these biological factors played a decisive role in the later spread of the plant and for its presumed use.
And this is what I'm talking about. I came to a stop under this beautiful white poplar tree, an enormous tree, and I discovered this little grove of feral cannabis. It's still early in the season. This one's very floral, very pleasant, very mild. A little bit limey, actually. It's lovely. It's amazing.
But open flowering groves like this are the secret reason why drug-type cannabis couldn't be cultivated in Europe. And it's all to do with pollination.
Cannabis is wind pollinated, and in fact, it can be pollinated from apparently quite considerable distances. So if, for example, a region grows lots of hemp, right, it will not be able to sustain the separate genetics of a cannabis, of a marijuana cannabis.
In other words, it's extraordinarily difficult to maintain selected genetics isolated from wild populations when growing cannabis outdoors. Over time, your plants will naturally hybridize with the local feral genetics. And this biological reality combined with one final obstacle to cripple any hope of drug cultivation in Europe. colonialism. Think about it. If you're running an empire in the 16th century and you want to expand your power globally, you need a few specific things. You need ships, sailors, soldiers, and most essential of all, rope and sails. Global colonialism demanded vast amounts of fiber, and so hemp was cultivated at proto-industrial levels even in the late medieval era.
And this is why medieval Europeans didn't smoke weed. They could have imported seeds, and in fact, they probably did from the Near East, and they could have imported plant material from, for example, the Ottoman Empire, and they probably did. But marijuana could not be permanently cultivated in Western Europe. Within just a few generations, it would homogenize with the more common, more dominant hemp type cannabis, and then it would lose its THC. It would stop being drug type.
Thanks for watching. One final note, almost all these conclusions are from my own analysis of current archaeological finds using the following sources.
I want you to know that I've smoked pot.
As always, like and subscribe or support me directly using the links in the description.